everybody, it's Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, a series between writers. So obviously I chat with a lot of fun people, and sometimes I know them, sometimes I don't, and they might write very different things than me or very similar. And today I spoke to somebody who I know a little bit. Like we would see each other at conferences, so it's that kind of a thing where you get to know each other's face, maybe have a brief conversation with them. But I finally got a chance to talk to him. So today I spoke to Del Chatterson. So Del is somebody who, spent his life in the business world like me, in the computer industry, really. Has been retired for some time. And in 2015 decided, he's been an entrepreneur as well, decided like, well, listen, I know so many stories about entrepreneurs. Why don't I write a novel from that perspective and maybe make it, a little dark, a little mysterious, maybe a thriller. So that's kind of what he set out to do. So he's applying his love of writing and his love of storytelling and his business acumen to, the world of publishing. And so he has 3 books out right now, all in the Dale Hunter series. And his most recent release is, I believe, he's got No Easy Money, Simply the Best, and his most recent release is Merger Maniac. All part of the series. And he is he's got a few books unpublished that he's got plans for as well. So this episode was very heavy on lessons of the industry, lessons about finding agents and marketing and cover design. All that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really good listen to about, how do I look at the publishing industry analytically, knowing that I'm going to write because I love to write, but I want to publish. So I've got to understand the industry. How do I do that? Who do I turn to? What advice do I listen to? What people do I hire to help me with this? So I think it's a very fruitful conversation along those lines. He's just a good guy, great writer. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. This is my conversation with Del Chatterson. After all these years, I somehow usually find a way to screw up the audio video portions of all of this. And if everything's going smoothly, then my internet connection gets crappy. So you can never account for it. So that's the dangers of doing podcasts not in the same location. But I've done about 100 of these, and I haven't had any absolute disaster so far.
Well, you're much better set up than me, and your production is generally very good. But you have the luxury, I guess, of editing after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a producer who actually lives in Ukraine, and he goes through the episodes and he cuts out all the pregnant pauses and all that kind of stuff. But they're pretty well intact. And when we get to the storytelling part, usually that has to be edited because they're usually a disaster.
Okay, so I was looking forward to that train wreck.
So how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. You've been have you been doing the so now I know you a little bit through, as I know a lot of writers, through conferences. I see your face and I'm like, oh, I know Del. And then this year I actually haven't done any conferences. I'm going to go to Iceland Noir in November, but that's it. Have you been steadfastly going to Thriller Fest and are planning to go to BoucherCon?
Yes to both. I was back at Thriller Fest in New York and enjoyed it again. I did the Pitch Fest again, but I've learned not to get too excited just because people ask to see your book. It's the second step of rejection.
Yeah. And for listeners out there, so Pitch Fest is basically at these writers' conferences, it's a collection of agents who have agreed to kind of do a speed dating with authors. To what do you get? You get like 5 minutes with them or something like that.
Yeah, they say 3 to 4 minutes.
Three to 4 minutes. So you're there with your elevator pitch. So it's essentially a verbal edition of your query letter. And like you said, the most that you could hope for is to have somebody say, yes, send me the book, send me a few pages. But we all know that that's a good sign, obviously. But, at that point, even after agents request this, it's still very difficult to get an agent, right?
It is, yeah. And so I got some enthusiastic responses to see the book, and some were quite good with feedback, but it was not for me is the end.
Yeah.
And I tried to make the pitch this time that my experience with Match.com, which worked out well in the end.
Well,
But it's kind of the same thing. In the first meeting, it's nope, this is not for me, or okay, let's do coffee, see what happens.
yeah, the whole agent thing is very, and I don't claim to know a lot about it, but it's a very difficult thing, right? Because these agents, by and large, depending on who they are getting query letters more than they can handle. So
Yeah.
it's almost like they're either reading query letters or listening to pitches it's very hard to be open-minded, I think. It's almost like they go into it looking for something that they don't like, because it's difficult to get excited when you hear 1,000 different pitches. So it's hard to land an agent.
Yeah, and I got kind of have a theory that I'm not looking for the agent who is looking for the book that will make their career, a blockbuster bestseller. They turned it into a movie, and that made my career. I'm looking for an agent that's looking to have a long-term relationship and look after me for my next 10 books.
That's right. And I think that's the way to go about it, because, the former, having that blockbuster novel is the most unpredictable thing in the world. Nobody can hear a pitch and be like, that's nice. Even if it sounds like it, who knows what's actually going to happen? I mean, we've all been through those ups and downs. And I think you're right, to have somebody who can nurture you and who can be, really a trusted ally to give you feedback. I've been with my agent my entire career, so for 20 years. And so for coming up, I'm about to send her off my 10th book. So, and that's been, we know each other so well that it is somebody who's in your corner and, is fighting for you and is also giving you great feedback and wisdom. And I don't think any agent goes into this with the expectation of unless there's some baked in story about the author in addition to the book, it's very rare that someone's going to be like, okay, this is going to be a 6-figure advance. This is going to be easy to sell. It just doesn't happen. And if it does happen, it's unexpected.
I think that both parties have to be experienced enough not to be naive and to not expect to fall in love at first sight. It's kind of, okay, let's get to know each other. Let's see your stuff. Let's chat a bit and see if this can be a productive business relationship or marriage, whatever analogy you want to make. But for me, it's kind of a career counselor, editor, advisor.
That's right.
And
that's right.
That's really what it is.
Totally. And this is kind of the course of the conversation that I wanted to have with you, was really geared towards kind of the business side of this, because you seem very entrenched into understanding the business side of publishing, which I think is essential, because, it's one thing for an author to say, I'm just going to sit here and write my book and let the fates do with it what they want. The reality of it is you have to be savvy, and having a business background like you do and like I did as well, I think it's very helpful. And just one quick agent story. I remember, after selling maybe 3 or 4 books with my agent, after having not sold the first 3, so we'd still been together a long time, you're still not making much money unless you have that breakout book. And I remember asking Pam one time, I think it was one of these conversations where I was, trying to be talked off a ledge by her. And I kind of just said, like, why are you with me? It was a very self-pitying comment, like, why? But it was honest, like you're not really making that much money off of me at that time. Like, why are you with me? And she's like, you're easy to deal with. And I think that's a lesson, right? Like in business, you don't want to be a dick. You want to be somebody who is a team player and is easy to deal with, and you're not causing them huge frustrations for a small amount of money. So that is essential.
Yeah, and I've heard agents say that as well, that they're looking for somebody that's easy to work with, responds to the advice, or is willing to do their half. They don't expect the agent to suddenly take over and make them a best-selling author, internationally acclaimed author. You still got to do the hard part yourself.
Yeah.
My business experience, I was in the computer business at the distribution level. We imported product with our brand name on it. and sold to computer dealers back in the 1980s, when instead of a bookstore on every corner, there was a computer dealer on every corner back in the 80s.
Right. The $2,500 Apple IIe's. Yeah.
You got it. I wasn't selling apples, but that was the era of the personal computer. And Microsoft and IBM and Dell and all the rest of them were trying to put a computer on every desktop in every office, every school, every home. And so it was easy. We went from $0 to $10,000 the first month to a couple of $1 million a month in sales in 10 years. So I thought, well, selling books ought to be easy. I have complete control of the product. I just write a good book and start selling.
Yeah.
I should $1 million, no problem.
Yeah,
that was a brutal lesson. It's a very different business. And although a lot of the entrepreneurial experience is helpful, I'm not a naive artiste or a young writer trying to find my way and getting ripped off by all the people in the author services business with vanity press or whatever you want to call them.
Right.
So I'm not easy to take advantage of, and I did pay for a lot of services, and I've invested a lot. As I heard somebody, Terry Shepard, do you know him from?
I don't.
I think I met him online. He's an author in this. And he said he made the mistake of checking his spreadsheet recently and thinking, oh my God, I haven't gotten my return on investment yet.
No.
And that was my advice. Yeah, I'm an engineer, MBA. I run my life on a spreadsheet, but this is not something you want to look at.
Totally. I'm the same. So my background is real estate finance and data centric consulting. And so I'm a numbers guy, and I've always been fascinated by numbers, and I like things to make sense. And the publishing industry is the most opaque industry you can think of. And so I think it all boils down to why are you writing to begin with? And if you're being analytical about it and saying, I'm going to transition to writing books because I can control the product and I can make money, you're probably going to be setting yourself up for disappointment. If you're writing because you're like, I've got some interesting stories I want to tell, I don't know if they're going to be good or not, but I'm writing for myself. I personally, I think that's the right way to go. And then having that business acumen to then research the industry, understand how it's done, and follow the process, good results can happen. But as you know, they're certainly not guaranteed. And an ROI is almost, it's incalculable because it's going to be negative. If you're truly looking at an IRR, depending on what your initial outlay is, and you're not even considering the outlay of just your hours of sitting at a computer writing, it's pretty depressing. So I think you can't look at it that way.
I had to go through that process. Is this my new expensive pastime or a hobby, or is it my next business venture? I'm going to make money all over again.
Right.
And you sort of state, well, okay, it doesn't really matter. And my wife worries that, are you ever going to be satisfied with how many books you sell? No, I'll never be satisfied, but it's definitely not enough right now.
Yeah. And I think you're approaching it right. I think for me, what was always helpful was to have goals. And the goals were never like, I'm going to be a #1 New York Times bestseller. The goal was like, I've written a book. I want to have one book published, in my lifetime, so goals that are hard, but not astronomically difficult. So that's always helpful for me, or to get a little bit bigger with my next book, or to do something a little bit different. I think that's pretty helpful for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting process. As you say, it's a journey, and it's a difficult business to manage. I just finished kind of an impromptu book tour of some Ontario bookstores, and I got home thinking, wow, this business of selling books is hard, whether you're an author, a writer, an agent, a publisher, or a bookseller.
Yeah.
And the only bookstore in the small towns around Ontario, the only bookstores that are continuing are those selling used books. So they buy it for $1, they sell it for $8 or $9, and it's recycling books is the only. Otherwise, it's the national chain who dominate the industry in the terms of book selling, and the 2 or 3 multinational publishers dominate the publishing industry. So
right
in between, where do you fit?
Right. So if you're if you're with a very small independent press, or if you're self-published, all of those things are huge challenge. I mean, there's challenges if you're, with a big house, even having your name. I mean, so for every single book that comes out with my publisher and they've got a great PR team, I hire my own PR team in addition to work with them, which is obviously not cheap, but I feel like this is giving my book the best chance to get out there. And you're still trying to get above the noise of not only all the other books out there, but every other form of entertainment that people are using to consume, right? Netflix, and that's the real competition. We're not competing with each other as writers. We're competing with TV screens, really, more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's it. You have to recognize that you find yourself in the entertainment industry, and you're trying to capture an audience, get readers' attention, and you're discovering that although the statistics say more people are reading in all categories, all age groups, now since COVID, they sort of got reintroduced to reading.
Right.
But there's still so many that there are hundreds of millions of readers around the world, but they're still hard to reach, and they're very narrow target audiences. I've even heard Stephen King and John Grisham on stage together complaining, "Man, it's hard to sell books." They said,
right.
They sell $1 million a year, and they still find it harder than it used to be.
You hear that, and you just want to give up. But I think again, it goes back to, like, if you set out saying, "I'm going to quit my job to do this," I think that's foolish. If you do it for the money, I think that's foolish. If you do it as a passion, and maybe it starts as a hobby, but if you take it seriously, good things can happen. I know very few people who just like whimsically wrote a book and it flew off the shelves.
That's what I find so interesting about these Thriller Fest or VoucherCon, which I'm going to in San Diego, is the stories of authors of how they got there and when they got there and what happened, and suddenly they made it.
Right.
And what about yourself? You said you've been writing for 20 years. How long have you quit your day job yet, or when did you decide to do this?
So I'm at an interesting crossroads, actually, because I'm a huge proponent of don't quit your day job. And I had a day job and was making really good money. And I'm like, okay, you figure out how to write books on the side. So I write now the way that I always have, is I write for an hour a day, and that's it. And I get a book done a year, and I'm just very consistent about it. I lost my job earlier this year because my company that I worked for years was sold to this multinational. This multinational got rid of consulting, and I ran the consulting division. They were focusing on, so whatever. I totally get it. And they gave me an amazing severance, and I worked for another month. And so I'm on like month 5 of just like, I'm very happy not working right now. And I'm kind of looking a little bit, but the point is, now I'm a full-time author, and it is scary, because if you think about, like, if I want to rely on my books to sustain me as the sole kind of breadwinner of my household, that's just not, for 99.5% of people, that's just not a plausible option, usually, unless you do have that big breakout. So you start thinking about, well, what else can I do? So I'm starting to teach. I'm starting to do other things that make money. And maybe it's not a windfall, but it forces you to be, and this is speaking your language, entrepreneurial about your writing. If you really want to pursue it as a full-time job, it's a lot more than just writing words on a page. There's a lot of other things you need to do.
No, it is a big commitment, and you do have to manage your time between the marketing and the sales and the writing part from one to the other. It's a never-ending challenge, but I'm in the fortunate position that I'm at the retired stage. I've been retired for 25 years, so
oh wow,
I had the good fortune to sort of dabble. I used to call it, I'm somewhere between semi-retired and self-unemployed. Which day is it today?
Right. I mean,
I had choices to make, and I finally got to the point that say, well, maybe I should dedicate myself to something else. And it's too late to play in the NHL hockey, and I've tried guitar. I'm never going to be a rock star. I'm not that good on guitar.
Right.
I've always enjoyed writing. And you're asking about, like, your journey goes back 20 years writing. I discovered probably late in life that I should have been a writer all along, and my ambition got frustrated in grade 11 high school. I don't know if you,
Huh.
I tell this story a lot. I've always enjoyed English. I was a good student in all subjects, and I kind of decided to follow that to university. But I was in grade 11. I was interested enough to sign up for a journalism class. I thought maybe that's what I should do. That could be fun. Could be a good career. And I went into the journalism class, and the teacher, Mr. Buckle, whose name I remember because he said, "Chatterson, get out of here. You're in the university program, and this is a vocational course."
Hmm.
The journalist say, "What? It was a vocational course?"
Huh.
But so I left that class and went to his geography class, and then went on to university to become an engineer, did an MBA, and I spent 50 years in business before I got back to writing.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because that's it. As you're growing up, there's typically not people around you, whispering in your ear that you should be a writer, or are supporting your decision if you're kind of leaning that way. Most people will hear, "Well, what the hell are you going to do with that?" It's like you might as well say, "I'm going to be like a French medieval history major," because at least with that you can teach.
Yeah.
So very few, and a lot of people even study writing, go on to do different things. But I feel like, and I've said this time and time again, I feel like if you're innately a writer, it's going to come out at some point. And that's the beauty, you mentioning, you're too old to play in the NHL. That's the beauty of writing. You can start at any age. I started in my 30s without any experience, but some people start much younger, some people start much older. Doesn't matter. As long as you have your faculties and the ability to get words onto a screen, you can write. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about it, is the best could always be yet to come.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is when somebody reads it and says, "Hey, this is pretty good." Oh my God, really? You think so?
See, I struggled with that though, because I never believed them.
Well, yeah, you get a few that are honest, say this is crap.
Yeah, right.
So I choose not to believe those ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, self-confidence is a terrible problem for most writers.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to give your work just to people who are going to couch it, but it's really hard to get raked over the coals as well. I'm a big proponent of critique groups, and becoming friends with them, but also people who will be very honest about it, and can give you good feedback. And once you've had those rejections, then you start if they're learning experiences, right? You grow from them if you're able to.
It takes getting used to. And I've learned that I've learned it's not a good reply to say, "What do you mean? I'm a great writer. You're a lousy reader."
Right. Yeah. Right. Or to start attacking reviewers or all of that kind of stuff. No, it's, if you frame everything as a learning opportunity, and that gets frustrating over time because you're like, I've been doing this long enough, I should, but man, rejection is always there, no matter how big you get. And when you get reminded of that, and when it slaps you in the face, it gets harder and harder to accept it. But the acceptance of it is such a beneficial thing, because it's the thing that lets you not only learn from your mistakes, but to grow and to kind of learn to let go. And that's a hard thing for writers to do, I think.
Yeah, I find that reviewers, I early in on the first book, which I wrote, which is called No Easy Money, I did recruit a couple of good editors, and I paid a lot for good editors. Then they were good coaches. But the best part was I had two editors. One was a big-time, well-known editor who claimed to have edited for Clive Cussler and Robert Ludlum. And so I thought, okay, this guy should be able to help me get over the hump to my best-selling, award-winning first novel. And he gave me a lot of good advice, but I found that I had another editor who was a Canadian. And the classic story was, at one point I had the hero of the story was watching his daughter play a game of ringette. And the American editor said, "What the hell is ringette?"
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
And the Canadian editor said, "Of course I know ringette. We invented it here in Ontario. And it's basically a version of ice hockey for girls before they got girls playing hockey. So it was, instead of a puck, they had a ring, and they put a straight stick into the ring to stick in."
Ah, okay. Got it.
So I had to elaborate a little bit on.
Right. Right.
From that, there were a lot of editorial comments that they didn't agree on. So I said, well, okay, that gives me the luxury of making my own choice. This is more subjective than I thought.
Right.
So part of it is understanding who are you writing for? Aside from yourself, who is the target audience and who is it that likes it? So from a business and marketing perspective, I find it's hard to figure out who is going to like these books or this kind of writing, and how do I get it in front of them? So,
Yep.
It's sort of middle-aged men or women interested in crime fiction.
Right.
Good writing, nasty writing, not enough sex, too much violence, too much about the BMW. I've had all kinds of criticism.
Right. Yeah. And you're never going to get consensus, right? I mean, I guess the way that I look at it is like, if I'm pleasing, 70% of my readers, then that's probably about the most, that's the most you're going to get. And, and as you write stuff like we do, kind of dark thrillery stuff, you really have to be aware of pacing. For example, you might go down a rabbit hole talking about, girls hockey, and you think it's adding a lot, and then somebody's like, this really pulled me out because this really slowed down this scene. And it's really hard to have that context yourself, no matter how many times you do it, until somebody pulls you out of it and says, it's slowed down after page 1. You're like, what?
Yeah, that's it. And you do get some harsh reviews from demanding readers, and part of it, I think, is making sure that between the title and the book cover and your book blurb, you describe it appropriately, so that people don't misunderstand what they're getting into, or they look at it, they flip it over, read the back, and say, no, I don't like this kind of stuff.
And that's a whole art form in and of itself, like a query letter. It's like that. I mean, and usually a publisher will change the title. They'll write the back cover copy, but then you help edit it, and then you work together on a cover. But you have to think about, like, what does this cover look like on a 3.5-inch phone screen? Because that's how most people are looking at it. How does this cover fit with other bestsellers in this genre this year? Because that changes too. Now they're using non-serif fonts, primarily with thriller covers. Or now it's turning into this little kind of a handwritten scroll kind of title. And, is that current, and is that reflect? It's crazy. That's where a publisher is actually really helpful, because then you go, this is what you do. I will probably agree to whatever you say because you're the expert in this and I want to have input, but you spend all day long figuring this stuff out and testing these titles. So who am I to just sit here and say it has to be this?
Yeah, I think you have to listen to the experts. I found that the best part of my recent book tour, visiting independent bookstores, aside from looking for rare and used books, it was also got some good input on readers, what sells. And there's one of the Canadian writers that I'm a member of Crime Writers of Canada, and one of our members is Ian Hamilton, writes a series of books called the Ava Lee Mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Ava Lee? And the bookseller was saying, yeah, I love those stories. And she basically said, are your books like his? Because I'd really like to read. I said, well, and I said, yeah, well, I kind of got the idea from him writing a business thriller, because he was about a Chinese Canadian lesbian forensic accountant. And he said, yeah, it's a huge turnoff. I tell people that, and they don't want to read the book. I said, I know but it's a huge international success, and not just among lesbian Chinese women.
Yeah, accountants.
Yeah, I don't know, and I had to admit, my wife really loves his books, and she's not that keen on mine, so that's really disappointing.
Yeah, and there's such an intangible portion of everything, right? There's something about how your voice changes over time and how it's reflected in the book, and just there's something that how it resonates with readers, that somebody can read the back of a book, look at the cover, look at the title, and it may or may not be for them, because there's just something about the voice that either clicks or doesn't click. And, if you spend too much time thinking about that, you'll never go anywhere, because that's just something that kind of subconsciously comes out of you, I think.
Yeah, it's funny how my writing has evolved. You were asking about my journey from business to fiction. My I had two business books. These were the second editions for which I did in 2020. I had time during COVID at home doing that else. I figured I might as well rewrite the first books. Don't do it the hard way is kind of how to succeed at business and avoid all the mistakes I made. So,
Yeah.
and then the first novel is No Easy Money. So it's a lot of the same lessons and the same stories. I guess that's what I found. Aside from being interested in writing, I'm a born storyteller. I can't resist. Every time I hear a joke, I can't resist on finding another way to tell it. I'm sure I can improve on that delivery.
Yeah.
So sick people say to tell us your life story. Well, my life story is boring, but I could tell you a few stories that are sort of same with a little fiction to make it more interesting.
Right. I will say writing a novel is supremely more difficult than rewriting a joke.
You think?
It takes you a while to figure out if you got it right, and then when you realize it can be approved upon, you're like, all right, I guess I'll write another book and apply those lessons. And it's just never ending. But again, I think that goes back to like, you do it because you love it first and foremost. And if you don't, it's going to be a long haul. You know, it's just like any job. If you do it and you hate it. So picture like a job that you hate, and then they also say, and we're also not going to pay you. That would be an unsuccessful writer.
Yeah, but we want you to do it again.
But we want you to, that's right. Give me 3 more of these and maybe we'll be interested. So I'm such a firm believer, and you really have to do it because you love it. And this is one thing that I'm learning without a full-time job right now. It's like I'm writing now twice a day because I just love it. And, you know, I'm being twice as productive and I'm being twice as fast. And I'm like, I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I can't wait to go to the coffee shop and write this one scene. And it might be 300 words and I'm done for that. But I'm like, I'm excited by that. And for me, that's important because because as you know, some days writing is terrible. It just is boring and it's painful and it's not fun, but you still have to do it.
Well, yeah, a novel is right. I find that I can whip off a novel pretty quickly, but then it's, oh shit, it's only 40,000 words. That's not enough.
Right. Exactly.
How do I fill it up to a full novel without adding fluff? Explaining the rules of ringette is not a good idea.
Right. That's not the fluff you want. So you have 3 books out, correct? Yeah. 3 novels out that are all part of a series. Is that correct?
Yeah, we publish novels. It's called the Dale Hunter series, Dale Hunter thriller series. My first editor insisted on calling them a thriller series. I don't find them that thrilling, and I'm not sure that readers are. It's not. I try to explain to booksellers, it belongs on the bookshelf alphabetically between David Baldacci and John Grisham, closer to Lee Child and Agatha Christie. And stylistically, it's kind of in that range as well.
Okay.
But it's more David Baldacci and John Grisham than Lee Child with the violence and all the rest. The 100% action thriller is not. It's
right. It's not a breakneck pace necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to be discriminatory, but for thoughtful readers is what some people have said. You want somebody who appreciates good writing, not continuous entertainment thrill ride. That's not quite what I'm doing. So it's scary. There's some suspense. There's some mystery. There's a death. There's usually a murder somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's kind of that story about an entrepreneur, a young family man trying to save himself and his family from crime and corruption and threats of murder and money laundering and the mafia and the gangsters from Taiwan to Las Vegas to New York, Boston, and Montreal.
Right. And there you go. Well, I mean, I think that's it, right? I don't think thrillers have to be a breakneck pace. And I think I find that to be kind of boring and easy. And if every page there's a physical threat going on, as long as your story has a character who they don't have to like them, but they should be invested in them. They want to know what happens to them. That's kind of all that matters. And sure, there needs to be probably a threat against them somehow. There's some kind of conflict that they're pushing back against, but it doesn't have to be life-threatening. You know, again, as long as your people care about your character. But I think writing a good character is probably one of the hardest things to do.
Well, that was my first challenge. I don't know if you know the name Dale Hunter. A lot of people think, oh, I know Dale Hunter. Is that the hockey player Dale Hunter? No.
Oh, I did.
I looked up the Dale Hunter. I thought that was the author. No, there is an author, Dale Hunter.
Okay.
So I have to explain. Well, here's the story of where Dale Hunter came from. Dale is like Dell,
Right.
and in Quebec, a lot of people mispronounce Dell as Dale. Hey, Dale, how are you?
Got it.
And when I was in the computer business in the 80s, we didn't have caller ID and all the other ways so you can identify spam and phone calls from the competition. When I was phoning for competitive information from my competitors, I would call and say, hey, this is Dale Hunter.
Yeah.
And they couldn't, they didn't have caller ID.
Right.
What's your price on such and such? Oh yeah, that's not a bad price.
So now you have all these readers like, oh, I remember that guy called me about competitive pricing 30 years ago.
So Dale Hunter came from that. But the trouble is he's too much like me. He's too nice a guy and he's boring. So I discovered as I started to write the first novel, Dale Hunter is too much like, there's no way he's going to be able to fight off the mafia and the gangsters that are coming after him in his business. So I had to invent another character called Frank the Fixer. So it ends up that there's now a buddy story, Dale Hunter and Frank the Fixer, whose real name is Faisal Mohammed Abu. He was a Somalian refugee, came to Montreal at age 17, grew up on the tough streets of Montreal, and he's learned how to deal with both the mafia and the police and the gangsters and all the rest. So he's the problem solver. So
Frank gets his hands dirty.
Sorry?
Frank gets his hands dirty.
Frank is the tough guy, yeah. So his guy ends up being Batman and Robin or Sherlock and Dr. Watson or something.
Yeah.
Between the two of them, they've now appear in all of the books. And in the one that's not yet published, I made Frank the hero. It's all about Frank.
Oh, okay.
More about Frank anyway. So I figured, what the hell, I might as well tell his story and let him. So Dale has become very much the sidekick while Frank the Fixer tries to locate a daughter who's been lost into the sex rings of Boston.
Wow. So when are you putting that next book out?
Well, that depends on the agent that I haven't found yet.
Got it. So
I have 3 more that are unpublished. I'm waiting to get somebody else to do them.
So what's the plan though? If you struggle to find an agent, would you just put it out on your own?
That's a decision to be made this year, I think. Yeah.
Got it.
I've got lots of content ready to go to put into the pipeline. I just like to have somebody manage the pipeline better than I've been doing. But I was going to say that my journey has gone this sort of winding route. I started writing fiction in a San Diego departure lounge in 2015.
Oh, wow.
I started scratching out. I just sort of had the right idea that the stories that I've been telling for years about entrepreneurs, I could make them more interesting if I made them fiction and added some crime and corruption and made Dale Hunter the hero. And I sort of sketched out 5 titles that I've now written.
Oh,
so the first 3 were published in 2018 and 2019. No Easy Money, Simply the Best, and Merger Maniac are stories of Dale Hunter in the 1980s. The next one, Bad Boys in Boston, is set in 2019. So before COVID, but it's 30 years later, basically.
Okay.
And now I'm kind of going back and forth between Dale at age 30 and Dale in his 60s.
Oh, wow.
They're still fighting crime and corruption together.
Right. Well, it sounds like you have, regardless of what happens with the industry side of things, it sounds like you've got not only a very rich imagination, you've got, a passion for doing this. Like you said, you're a natural storyteller. Now you've been working on figuring out how to tell those stories through novels, which is different, obviously, than just spinning yarns. But you seem very invested into the storytelling, not just the book selling.
It's kind of like you were describing, Carter, that you kind of get hooked on writing when you discover, hey, I can do this, and exploring the creative side of your brain. Like, I'm an engineer in MBA, I'm very analytical, detail-oriented, organized, everything's on a spreadsheet, I have a purpose, I have a plan, all those cliches apply to my personality. But suddenly, and I used to think of myself as creative, as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, as a businessman, always looking for creative solutions. other than the standard conventional wisdom or the standard approach. But trying to imagine a scene. Okay, what would this guy do if somebody knocked on the door and came in and said, okay, I'm asking for protection money. We're going to burn you down next week unless you pay us $1,000 a week. Oh shit! How would I deal with?
But you said the key word. You said the keyword solutions. Like all of that right brain, left brain stuff all boils down to problem solving ultimately. Because I'm the same way. Like with data, it's all about finding creative ways to solve problems. And so when you're writing that scene that you just described, the first thing I think of is, okay, I know this is what the conflict has to be. Now, how do I make this A, realistic, B, not a trope or cliched, and C, interesting to me? And it's just a lot of it's just trial and error, man. Like, you write the scene a few different ways and you see which one kind of resonates the best. But it's then over years and years and years of doing that, you build that muscle. And so not only does the physical act of writing get easier, the problem solving part, you're like, yeah, I've done this before. I think this would work here because I've done it enough and it was received well. But it's all problem solving.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a progressive experience of revelation. Hey, I can do this. I can remember. You're probably familiar with Stephen King's book on writing.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. In that book, he has a couple of exercises. Here's my first draft. Take a look at it, and then here's how I edited it. And he shows you what he stroked out, what he rewrote. And they said, okay, here's the next chapter. Try it yourself, and then see how. And I sort of looked at it, and thought, okay, now I get it. And then
right.
I did the same things he did. So
right.
You learn what it takes, how you can improve it by removing words, changing the punctuation, choosing a better word.
Yeah, it's funny over time how like even you'll be reading your stuff and a sentence just doesn't feel quite right. And when you look at it, you're like, it looks fine. But then there's your subconscious saying this one sentence can be better. It's a little bit clumsy. And you look at it and you're like, oh, I took out half the words and it's much more direct. It's better. But when you're early on reading that, it's so easy for your brain to go, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Keep going, keep going. And after a while, you're like, nope, something's sticking with this one thing. And then you're naturally getting better over time.
Yeah. Well, it's worth reading a lot. Like the kind of the lessons I've learned from other authors and from these conferences is read a lot, write a lot, and talk to other writers a lot. And those three things all help you get better at writing and coming up with solutions. And it sort of becomes ingrained. You read a good book and you don't absorb it all, but you recognize what you could have done better yourself.
Right. Totally.
And I'm reading Raymond Chandler, and I'm thinking, oh, I wouldn't have used that word. I would have said this.
Yeah.
So I find myself editing other people.
Yeah. Screw you, Raymond Chandler. I know better.
You're really good, but every once in a while you think that's a strange choice of words. Of course,
right.
In the 1940s, there's
right. Things change over time.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Dale, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our storytelling ourselves. So I've chosen 3 books, somewhat at random from my bookshelves. I'm going to let you choose one of them. We're going to pick a random sentence from a random page, and I'm going to read that sentence, and then that'll be the first sentence of a very short, maybe 2-minute long short story that we'll kind of go back and forth on. So I've got Robert Daly's The Innocence Within, John Katzenbach's State of Mind, and Joseph Finder's Killer Instinct. So choose one of those.
Yeah, I like Joseph Finder. I've met him at a couple of events, so let's try his.
Okay, give me a page between 1 and 384.
699 or 384, 3 through 299.
299. Okay, I'm going to find a sentence here that might work, and I'll read it, and then you just give me a sentence or two. All right, this is about as basic as it gets. He'd set me up.
I knew the SOB had set me up, but he still caught me by surprise. I didn't think I'd be standing on this dock looking into dark water.
I'm normally so prepared. I would have thought 3 steps ahead and had all the things that I needed to get out of this mess. But now I'm just standing here in a bathing suit, flip-flops, and a tank top, and not a single weapon to be found. I don't know what I'm going to do.
And I think there's a car approaching at the other end of the dock. Just turned the lights out. And some big guy also in a wetsuit. Is he throwing me in or coming after to save me?
By the look on his face, I know it's the former. I've got a decision to make. I can try to fight him, but the odds aren't good I'm going to beat this guy. Or I could just jump in the water and hope to swim in the darkness. Problem is, I don't know how to swim.
This looks like it's time to learn how to swim. And he leapt off the end of the pier.
I think we call it there because I think he drowns.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I think that's what happens. I think that's, yeah, I think he's dead.
That's it. Fade to black.
He'll be. Well, listen, man, Del, it was nice chatting with you. And congratulations on your 3 books out.
I really enjoy what you do, and thanks for giving me a chance. Which episode number is this going to be, by the way?
This will be close to 100, somewhere around there. They, we usually release them like about 5-6 weeks after we record, and I'm in the 90s right now. So
yeah,
so it's been a commitment.
Number 94, so I was a little bit terrified that I don't want to be the milestone 100.
I have no idea which number 100 is going to be, but I'll let my producer figure that out.
Okay.
So, but
99, it would be my lucky number. So
there you go. Well, best of luck with everything. And yeah, I'll hope to see you on the conference circuit next year. I'm sure I will.
Are you at MouserCon in?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I'm saving some money this year, but next year when I have a new book out, I'll probably be back.
Yeah, I just got confirmed that I'm on the technology panel.
Oh, right on. Good.
And I have to admit, I was in the technology business for 15 years, but I'm not a technician. I know nothing about technology.
Make it up.
It's also fiction.
Yes, exactly. All right, buddy. Chat soon.
It was a pleasure.
Take care. So that's it. That is my conversation with Del Chatterson. It was a good one. A short and sweet story at the end that maybe ended a little bit tragically, but that was a good time. So if you want to find out more about Del, please go to his website, which is just delvinchatterson. And if you want to go to my website, there you can sign up for my newsletter, buy my books, check out the retreats that I offer, all that good stuff. That's just at carterwilson.com. So that's it. That is it for now. More episodes of Making It Up out soon. In the meantime, thank you as always for watching and or listening to this. Take care.